Okay. Um, Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to join in on this virtual presentation. I'm going to talk to you today about what to do with benchmark tests, results. My name is Ward Roberts. I'm the Director of Secondary Curriculum for the district. And here's what I'd like to do today in about 28 short minutes. I want to talk to you about a couple of activities you can do with benchmark results. And I'm going to also talk about some resources, places you can go to get these reports that'll help you. We'll start off very kind of general and then get a little bit more specific down to the kid level as we go through. Also, I wanted to mention that a lot of you may have been to presentations with curriculum specialists where they do some of the same things. So a lot of that information might be repeated, but I'll try and give you some different ideas as well. And also, those curriculum people are great about getting down to some nitty-gritty curriculum content with you based on these reports and this analysis. So if you need some information from them, feel free to contact them. They're great. Inside this presentation, I'll show you in just a minute how to get a handout, but afterward you can have access to this PowerPoint if you forget something, and we'll also save this presentation as a video so you can review it afterward if you need to do that. As far as the handout goes, I think you should be able to do this. On the bottom of your link page, there's something that looks like a computer screen. If you click or mouse over that, then you can see up at the top where it says attachments. If you click on attachments, you should be able to see a PDF file that's got some information in there. It just says what to do with benchmark results handout. So I think you can open that and it'll open up in a window different from your link screen. And the first thing you would notice on that handout is it's going to talk about our benchmark tests, and those come from almost in every case, they're directly from the state released exams. If you don't have a copy of that exam on paper, I want to show you the two places where you can get those benchmark results, the benchmark tests online. Okay? The easiest way to do it, to find the STAR release tests online, is to just do an internet search for STAR release tests. When you do that, something will pop up from the Texas Education Agency probably, and it would look like this. And there you can find all of the release test questions and test forms. The direct website that's listed in the handout is just the TEA website. Then you type in student.assessment and STAR and test questions. And what you would find if you open up one of those tests is basically the test as it would appear for students. Those are great for working with kids if you want to copy a question or a picture or go over any of those items electronically. You can do that. But there's a different way you can get the test if you're talking about the teacher version that helps you plan for instruction. And I'll show you where that is real quick. A different version of the test you can find on the Lead Forward website, which is lead the number 4 and ward.com. You can either type the word resources or just click on the resources button right there. And then that first tab says release tests. And if you scroll down right there, it's going to look something like this. And in that first column, it'll say IQ. Release tests, and you can find those by grade and subject area pretty easily. Now, what these look like is it's the release test in what they call the IQ format, investigating the question, because they'll have the item but some teacher data as well that's kind of built into the side. So you've got the question, but you also have the correct answer. You've got the text student expectation up in the corner. The item number on the original test is listed there as well. It'll tell you what type it is, whether it's readiness or supporting. It'll have a spot to put data in there, and it'll also have this thing that we'll talk about in a minute called taught versus learned. Okay, all right. There's a couple of spots that will be empty, though, on that form for data, and that's something that you have to get from a DMAC report. And specifically, it's the one that's called item analysis, and here's what that item analysis form looks like. So what that form tells you is it tells you what percent of your kids got it correct, got the question correct, but it will also tell you what percent got or picked each of the answer choices, A, B, C, and D. That's helpful as well. So very quickly, I'm going to show you how to get that report in case you don't know. This is a screenshot of the DMAC website. And one of the first things you notice when you get on there is there's two different places where you can get results. The state assessment side has the official, like, end of the year STAR test results. But if we took a benchmark, that's going to be on the local benchmark side that's called tech score. So since this was a local benchmark, I'm going to go into the tech score side. And once you do that, you have to click on instructional reports, and just notice that there are different tabs. And right now we're on slide 14 of 55. There's a district, campus, teacher, class, and student tab. For our benchmarks, you have to be able to find the test form, and it's pretty easy to figure that out. It'll have an MA for math or an RE for reading. That's how they're coded. The next one is the grade level, and then the test version is next. And I think most of these, especially for elementary, the benchmarks have an 05 test code. If you're not sure, if you just mouse over it, then it'll tell you which test you're looking for. Okay, and then once you pick the test, you can get these different reports that are available, such as item analysis. That's the first one I wanted to pick. So you just check that, run the report, and here's what it gives you. It'll tell you for each item which reporting category it came from, what the texts were, if there were any process standards associated with it, the percentage of kids that got it correct, and more importantly, the percent that chose each of the answer choices. So I just want to run through a real quick example of an item and its item analysis. This is from a 6th grade math test, and it's question number 20. So I took a little screenshot of the item analysis report, and from that I can make sure I'm on the right question, which is question 20. And it'll say that 50 is the percent of kids that got it correct, so I'm going to write a 50 up there. And then it'll also tell me what percent got each item choice, or picked each item's choice. So I'm going to write those in there. 41% picked A or F, 3% G, 50% picked the right answer, there it is again, and 6% picked J. What does that help you do? It helps you kind of figure out why kids missed it. We know that 50% got it right, that was the right answer there, but why did 41% of kids pick this one? Well, you'll notice it's just the same thing but backwards. Instead of multiplying, they're dividing. And you can kind of look up at the problem and see, if you start with N and need G, you're going to divide by 16. But if kids decided to go the other way, like start with G and try and find N, that would be a multiply problem. So the benefit of this item analysis is it helps you figure out why kids might have picked the wrong answer. In doing this with teachers, a lot of times they'll ask or want to compare benchmark results to last year's results. So you can do that the same way. You can run the same report. You just have to find it in a different place. Instead of going into tech score, now I'm going to go into the state assessment side and see how did kids do on that same item in the spring of last year. It looks very similar. You have to pick the test that you're talking about and then check the item analysis box and run the report. And here's the results for the same item for the district last year. And you can just run a real quick comparison. That on the STAR test last year, 63% of kids got it right. And you see the breakdown right there. But still the majority of the wrong answers came from F. So kids typically run into that problem no matter which year you're talking about. Also, here's a note: if you do that comparison, don't get too depressed about your results, because that 50% number is from a class that's taking the test in January, whereas that 63 is an end-of-the-year assessment. A lot of times in the classrooms where I've been so far working with this data, they'll even have results that are already higher than last year's. Of course, some lower, but it's a mid-year exam, so we're well on our way to getting all those questions right and improving those scores. I'm going to stop for just a minute and do a little bit of review. If you're looking for the test forms, there's two places you can go. If you want the form that the kids would see, you can go to the TEA website and find those exams there, if you don't already have them. Or if you want that teacher test version, you can go to that Lead Forward website and click on resources and find them there. Also remember that there's two different types of data when you're in DMAC. If you're looking for your benchmark test for this year, you have to go under tech score, and if you want to compare it to the STAR from last year, you have to go under the State Assessment tab. Okay, here is another thing that you can do with those lead forward teacher documents. Because they have each item kind of listed separately in its own box, you can take a pair of scissors and cut that document into strips so that you've got one item on each little strip and kind of separate them. And then there's a lot of other cool sorts that you can do that will help you pull some information out of that benchmark results. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is to take a collection of maybe 10 items from either like a topic or a reporting category, and once you've got all that data on all those 10 items, is to just sort of arrange them in different ways so that you can try and pull some different information out of it. Okay? For example, the most obvious way would be to sort them just in order from low to high so that you could see which items, types gave you the most trouble and which you're doing good at. In other words, just take all those items, put them in numerical order, 41, 52, 58, all the way up to the highest. Okay, and then pinpoint either those low items that you want to go over or the high items that you want to use to validate what your kids are doing. Then you can use that item analysis to kind of dig in and see if you can figure out what's going on. We are now on slide 27. I'm trying to read some of those responses. Okay. Another thing you can do to sort those items is, instead of sorting them by the data, sort them by the text number. So in other words, like list all of the, or put all the 2A's together, then the 2B's, then all the 3's together, all the text statements that are 4 together, and group them like that. And the question is, why would you want to do it by text number? Well, it's because a lot of times they'll have multiple questions over the same skill, and that's how you could group them together. For example, looking at that item right there that only 41% of kids got right, that might not be necessarily a low skill, because the other 2 items from the same skill had much higher percentages. So that might be just a problem with the question instead of the skill. And you can kind of get a handle on that if you list them by text number instead of by the data number, right? We know on these tests those student expectations can be assessed in a lot of different ways, and there's really not an easy way to anticipate every single way an item could be asked. The downside of that is, on tests, kids have to see or get used to seeing things like they've never seen it before. But don't get the problem with the item confused with the problem with the skill. Just as an example real quick, look at this one student expectation from 5th grade science. It says, students are expected to classify matter based on physical properties, including mass, magnetism, physical state, solid, liquid, gas, relative density, sinking, floating, solid, blah, 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 and so forth and so on. Right? Think of all the different ways you could ask a question on that. I mean, at least 14 or 15 different question types or more. Here's another one from 3rd grade. Use comprehension skills to analyze how words, images, graphics, and sound work together in various forms to impact meaning, and kids need to make inferences in text and blah, 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 blah. Could be many different things. Which brings up the case of what I'm going to call weird items. That means items that you didn't really expect to see on the test because they don't look like the way you taught it. And I'll give you a couple of examples real quick. Oh, yeah, there's a fire truck that just went by. Okay, imagine taking those items on strips of paper and putting them into 2 piles. Based on this question alone, is this the way you taught it? If yes, put it in one pile. If no, put it in the other. I'll give you a real quick example. This comes from 3rd grade reading. This was about a passage where they asked kids to look at cause and effect. Cause and effect, let's say the teacher says, yeah, I've done that, I'm going to put it in the yes pile. Here's another one. This is just about a summary. Yeah, we do summaries all the time. I'm going to put that in the yes pile. No big deal. But here was the one I wasn't expecting. It had a photograph and asked kids to say which idea is supported by the photograph. Maybe that's one that you didn't really think to include in your instructions, so you put it over here in the no pile. And just go through the test items like that. Why would you want to do that? Well, just to sort of separate out the ones that are an assessment of the way you taught it, or the ones where kids had to apply something that wasn't really part of the classroom instruction, right? What they learned, what they can apply, might be in the other pile. There's a spot on those lead forward documents to let you check a box for that. It says taught versus learned. Are these similar to the way that I taught it? If so, that would be like a yes. Or do they require application? If so, that would be a no. And you can take your items and put them into two piles like that. Why? It's to compare the results and see what you get. Here's another couple ways you could sort these items. You could split them into... I'm sorry, I'm going to back out. Understand that that is something that the teacher decides, and every teacher might have it done a little differently. The information at the top, that's going to come from the state or the district, but it's the teacher's judgment call that will go into that taught versus learned thing. So you've got, these items that you're going to call yes, it looked like the way I taught it, maybe a few items that are in the no pile. Compare the percentages. See if that gives you any information. Here's something else to consider. I know at the junior highs, grading these things is a big issue. So how do you give a grade for a benchmark test, especially when the passing standard might be like a 38 or a 40%, but our passing standard on report cards is a 70. So one thing you can do is to run this report called Student Responses. And it looks like this. Here, the plus signs mean that the kid got it right. And if there's a letter in there, it means that's one that a kid got wrong, and that's the answer that they picked. If you've got a math problem with grid ends, it even gives the grid end answer that they put. Okay, so take that Student Responses report and do this. So let's say you had 4 questions that you thought, no, those didn't look like the way that I taught it. Well, you can either highlight them, mark them out, color them in some way so that you know which ones they were, and then take a look at each kid's score going across, and you can count up the number they got right, excluding those 4 items. Like this kid that got a 75 overall, if you count the number of ones he got correct that don't include those no items, he got 11 out of 12 right. So his score would be a 92. Maybe that's the grade that you could put in the grade book. Now on the other items, he only got 1 out of 4 of those. So that's an issue that you need to work with. He's having trouble applying. But take a look at this kid, and this is real data that I ran. He got a 69 overall, but if you count the number of yes questions that he got right, he got 10 out of 12 of those right. So it would kind of improve the kid's confidence, I think, to tell him, you got 10 out of 12 right on the ones like we did in class, you're doing great. We just need to work with you on these ones that require a little application. Very quickly, another couple of ways to sort. You can sort them by whether they're readiness or supporting standards. Just put them into 2 piles. You could also take a look at the ones that include process standards and the ones that don't. So take your items on cards, split them into 2 piles, and then compare the percentages and see if that tells you anything. For example, if they're doing better on those supporting skills, that gives you some information that you can thank last year's teacher for. If they're doing better on the readiness standards, that tells you that you've really been focusing and doing a good job on this year's curriculum. So it's sometimes important to be able to separate those things out. The process standards for math and science also give you a good item sort. Look at the ones that have double coding and the ones that don't. The ones that don't sort of give you an idea of how kids are doing just on the straight content, just the plain knowledge and skill statements. The ones that have a double coding will give you an idea of how kids are performing on those ones that require them to interpret things, connect things, do that extra problem solving stuff. Okay, so I'm going to just go back and review a couple things that we've talked about. If you can get those documents where it's got the items that you can just cut out onto strips, you can sort the data and sort the items in a couple different ways. You can do a low to high, You can sort it by the student expectation number. You can put them into two piles based on whether or not they look like the way you taught it in class, or maybe the stuff you haven't gotten to yet, so that you can sort of separate out those scores. You can sort it by readiness and supporting standards or by process standards. Those are great things to do with your teacher friends in PLC meetings or after-school meetings. And in the last 6 or so minutes that I've got with you today, I want to talk about some other student reports and where you can find them on DMAC and what kind of information they can help you with. Again, remember that DMAC has those two sides. I'm going to be doing these on the local side because these are dealing with the benchmark and not last year's STAR results. We've already done a couple. We did the student responses and the item analysis, but I want to show you real quick what the SE performance report looks like and the SE tutorial, then the reporting category tutorial report, and lastly the targeted skills report. If you run an SE performance report, what it tells you is for every one of the text numbers, student expectations, you can see how many questions there were on it and what the percentages were as far as how many kids got those correct. And here's an example. Now you might look at this and go, ooh, these are the two that I want to look at, these two questions, because only 36 and 38% of kids got them right. I actually think the one in between is a little more important, because even though only that one had a 46% correct rating, look how many questions there were. There were 4 questions. Those other ones above and below, there was only one question, but the one in the middle there, that 46%, tells me there were 4 questions on it and the percentages was still low. That's probably a readiness standard also, where those items that only have one question are probably some of those supporting standards. At any rate, that report gives you that sort of overall view. Instead of looking at the individual items, you can look at the items in total. There's also something called a student expectation tutorial report, and these are kids' names that I just kind of whited out for privacy's sake. But here's what it'll have. It'll have the text statement up in the corner, such as 4.13b. It'll tell you how many items were on the benchmark that covered that one, and what the percent correct is again. But then it'll tell you which kids got all of them right. So these 6 kids got all 3 questions right. There's a next tier. These 15 kids got 2 of them right. This next set of kids, 12 kids, got only 1 of them right, and you still had a bunch of kids that didn't get any of those 3 items right. So if you're getting ready to do a tutorial or an after school or a pull out or just review those in class, it'll kind of tell you which kids that you need to focus on or which kids you could get help from. Likewise, there's one that does that same thing for the reporting category. So instead of the student expectation, now you've got the reporting category. So like category 1, this one had 17 items, and there's your percent mastery. Then it kind of breaks it down again by kid. You can see that these kids at the top got most of them right, but there's going to be some down at the bottom as you move on that got fewer and fewer items. And it just lists the kids' names. You can run that by class or by all the kids that you have who took the test. Okay, and those are the tutorial reports. There's also a targeted skills report. And what that does is it kind of gives you every bit of information in a nice little format that you could even cut in strips and pass back to kids. It's got what they put for every question. There's a plus sign if they got it right and a letter if they got it wrong. It's also got the category count, reporting category up in the corner. Basically, it has all the information you would need on that single kid. That's a cool one as well. And that's going to about do it. I finished by about 4:15. That's pretty good. Remember that there's that handout that you can get from Link. If you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll forward it to you. Also, if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint, I can send that as well. And I'll also be sending out some instructions on where you can find this video if you want to review it or share it with one of your friends. Remember that the curriculum specialist also can provide you some great tools and information and follow-up. They can help you get down to the nitty-gritty about picking some activities to help with some of these areas where kids might be struggling. So at this point, I'm going to turn off my video and my audio, and we'll sign out in just a minute. I appreciate your time. Let us know what we can do to help you, and have a happy spring.